Hello, welcome to this nutshell video on preschool special ed services. So if you've gotten here, you've had the evaluation and you've had the eligibility meeting, and the team has determined that this student is eligible for special ed services through the school system. So you're going to now write an IEP or a service plan. And I've got another video on IEPs. I encourage you to watch that video. So which you'll write is going to be determined by very specific rules, and your case manager will share those rules with you and talk to you about whether you're going to write an IEP or a service plan. So the first thing you're going to do as a team is look at the evaluation data and look at where is the child right now. So it's called present levels. Where is the child right now? Because that's going to determine how you set your goals. So I want you as a parent to be involved in setting these goals and have opinions and a voice in setting these goals. So you're going to set some goals, and I think it's also the goals are typically going to be geared toward school readiness, getting the student ready for elementary school. But I encourage you to think bigger than that and to know, I want to share with you that the IDEA, which is the law that governs special education, has three bigger goals. It has three goals for all students with IEPs, that the whole process of special education is preparing students with disabilities for further education, employment, and independent living. So even if you've got a little one, I encourage you to start thinking about further education, employment, and independent living, because things move fast. So, okay, but now for this IEP meeting, we're going to talk about goals. We're going to talk about getting ready for elementary school. Okay, then the next thing you're going to talk about is accommodations. And accommodations are changes that remove barriers, and because of a disability. So I'll give you an example that I like to use. Imagine you've got a classroom that's at the top of the stairs, and you've got a student that's at the bottom of the stairs in a wheelchair. Does that student have access to that classroom? No, unless the student has a ramp or a lift or an elevator or some way of getting up those stairs to that classroom. So an accommodation would be provided to that student that would provide access to that classroom. So for preschool students, access to education could look like a wiggle seat, or it could look like sensory breaks. It could look like the ability to walk around instead of having to sit down all the time. Accommodations can look a lot of different ways. I encourage you to do some research about that. If you want to talk about it, I can talk about that. Accommodations are important. They remove barriers and they provide, it's all about access to education. Okay. Then the next thing you're going to talk about is services. Okay. And the services are going to be determined by what do you need to be able to meet those goals? What services do the student need to be able to meet the goals? Then the next thing you're going to talk about is placement. And I have to laugh because it's frustrating sometimes for parents, because we, as parents, want to talk about placement first. We want to go in and we want to talk about where everything's going to take place. What school is my child going to be in? Where is all this going to happen? And I want to tell you, I was one of those parents. I wanted to talk about placement first. They can't talk about placement first. They got to go through all of these steps first in the IEP. It's the law. It's the rules. Okay. So be patient, go through the steps, because placement is determined on what's the appropriate place for these services to take place. So if you haven't determined the services, you can't talk about placement. And if you haven't determined the goals, you can't talk about the services. So you see what I mean? It all builds, and placement is something that you talk about later in the process. Okay, so placement is the appropriate place for the services to take place. It could be a preschool classroom, it could be a daycare, it could be a home, it could be coming to the school for speech therapy, it could be a classroom at the school, could be a lot of things, could be a hospital, it could be a lot of things. It's based on what the child needs. And it's important to know that it's based on the child's current need. It's not based on what might happen. And sometimes we, as parents, want to base services on what we think might happen and what we're afraid might happen. But we can't do that because the law says that the services have to be based on, this whole IP has to be based on the current need. But the beautiful thing about this IP is that it can change. So if the current needs change, you can call an IEP meeting and say the needs have changed and we need to change the IEP. But when you're in that meeting, it has to be a current need, not a future need that might happen, because it might not happen. You don't know. So the team is going to meet at least once a year. Progress is going to be monitored. You're going to get progress reports. And if you've got questions about them, I encourage you to ask them. You're an important part of this team. I encourage you to do the research, read your parent rights, ask questions about your parent rights, understand your parent rights. I'd love to talk to you about your parent rights or this whole process. Reach out to me. My information is on the screen. You can also call the county office and ask to be in touch with me. I've given you Diane Roden and Christy Mappin's information, so you can also call the county office and ask for them. If you don't remember their names, it's fine. Just call the county office and say, can we talk to somebody in preschool special ed? So if you're not in Coweta County, you can also call your county school system and say, let me talk to somebody in preschool special ed, and they'll give you to the right person. You also might consider going to parentmentors.org and see if you've got a parent mentor in your county, because that could also be a really good resource for you. Have a good day.